I tell you what, I don't know what I would have been like had I known all this information so long ago. It was like, look out, world, here she comes.
Right?
But
I already feel that way about you. You're a little like, look out, world. I love that.
Let me tell you, life is meant to be powerful and fun and, all kinds of things.
Welcome back to the Mind Change Podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean. And today we have a very special guest with us, Brenda Tillman. And Brenda was a part of some of the very first book clubs that ever happened. And so we thought it would be a great idea to bring her on and talk about that experience. So welcome, Brenda.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to have you. Okay, so I sort of just gave it away, but how did you come to find out about mind change?
Well, it was actually during COVID, and word went around that there was going to be a book club. And I don't know that I knew the name of the book that we were going to be doing at first. But once I signed on, it was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. It was like there was nothing to do during COVID. Except to be at home and read and do all these things. So I thought it was a good idea. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Aww.
Really was.
So great.
Yeah.
So then you find out it's called Mind Change, and then you start to get into it. So what was that like for you when, like you're first introduced to the material? What did you think about that?
Well, I think the word change itself, I've always been super curious about lots of things. And just for many, many years, looking forward to, even one of the reasons why I ended up in Texas or why I've moved all over the place, was this idea of change, always thinking, oh, if I do this, it'll change this, or I'll be different if I'm in a different environment, that whole thing.
So you had a good relationship with change.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, pretty good.
That's good. So then mind change.
Well,
changing your mind might be a little bit different than changing your state or
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't know a lot about it beforehand. Just seeing the title, I think I may have thought, it was just something way out there, changing your mind about things. But on the other hand, it was, I change my mind all the time about lots of things. So just the idea of learning something new and different was what, drew me pretty much.
So what were some of the first things that you gleaned that you were like, okay, this is going to be, you said before, like one of the best decisions you've made in your life.
Yeah.
Like what were you getting from the material that made you feel like that?
Okay. Well, starting off, it started off talking about the brain. And I've never had an interest, in science per se, and I don't even know the last time I read something about the brain. I thought of that word, even brain, it sends me in the other direction. It's like, nothing I'd be interested in. But there were so many facts, that I had never heard of before. And I've been around a long time, and it's like, the brain processes 400 billion. It's like thoughts per second. I'm thinking, how is that possible? I can hardly fathom what a billion looks like or feels like or, is.
Yeah.
And so it was like, wow. Even things, the fact that it's constantly changing, it's like it doesn't get to a certain point and that's it. It stops. There were just so many facts that all of a sudden became interesting to me. It was like, wow. It was like that. And I can remember taking one of my grandsons to lunch, and I thought it would be a cool fact that he didn't know. He was like 10 at the time, I think. Well, he already knew all that. It was like I was the one playing catch up, so it's like, wow, it was just really interesting to me. to find out basically how the brain works. And, it's not something you see all the time. Now, every time there's a show on PBS or, I see an article, it's like I want to read it. And even now, since that mind change, it's like there have been changes, there have been new discoveries, and so it's like constantly evolving.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So when did it move from, because listen, I love a good book and I like to learn new things. But like I say in the book, if the book isn't going to change my life, it's hard for me to give it that much attention. So when did it start to go for you from information and cool facts to, oh my, this actually could make change happen in me?
Yeah. I think learning how the brain works and how that applied to me, I'm just kind of like, oh, my brain can do that, or I can do that, or things like the brain and the mind, it's like, okay, it's the same thing. Okay. Why didn't I know this before? It's like with every new thing that I learned, it was a revelation that made me think about myself, think about who I am, why I do what I do, all those kinds of things, And so, and it was great because it was interactive. There were questions before the chapters that, I was able to think about after reading it, and then the interaction within the class itself. Everybody's got an opinion or, a thought about things. And I like it that they're different than mine, because it forces me to think about things I wouldn't normally think about.
So how do you think that was different for you? Like if you had just read it by yourself versus having done it in the book club, how was that? Like, why was the book club so instrumental for you?
I don't know that I would have picked the book up if it was something I was doing by myself. It's just not, wouldn't have been my cup of tea per se.
Yeah.
But again, once I got into it, it was exciting. It made me look forward to every week, being able to get with the ladies, and I couldn't wait to read my assignments, and make all my notes and that kind of thing. It was that interesting. And it wasn't just the fact-based, but it was, I think for me, it was more practicing, like what we're being talked about. Okay, so what does this mean? How does this work? Why does this work? Asking myself questions. I'm a questioner.
Love that.
And so that's basically
great. And when it moved into like practical application, so the book is sort of set up, it gives you all the science and all the information in the front half, and then part 2 is, okay, now let's get into some of the work, doing Safe Haven, Manifesto, your GPS, and then the pain cure list. So how was that transition for you?
Again, it was great. I think the first thing I think of was like the affirmations, for example. I have collected affirmations and sayings for a long, long time, because I like reading. I like the idea of whatever it says, But to look for affirmations that apply to me, and it's like, that wasn't normal for me. I didn't walk around, repeating affirmations, although I'd read a good one and keep it moving, But this made me want to have more. I had a little book, that I'd write down all the affirmations that I'd find or things that would, appear. And I can't explain it, but it made me feel like I was looking inward at myself, and from that, we went into things like a manifesto, for example. I had never done one of those in my entire life before, and usually, well, I journal a lot, but not about what I'd like for things to be like. It's more about what's happening right now, and it kind of stays there, But this was like, wow, it's almost like writing your own story, how I'd like for things to be, and that was really hard. It was hard because I'm not used to thinking about things I want, or how I'd like for things to be. It's just not a normal thing. More reality based, I guess, for the most part. So that was really exciting. And it just helped me to dream, And at this stage of the game, I've done most of the things I've wanted to do, and then some. But to have a vision for what could be like in the years to come, that was totally different for me. And I really liked the idea of it. There was so much, so much. It's hard to even remember it all at once. It's like, it's just a constant newness, a constant awareness of, and the whole thing about being mindful, being present. that was really great. And I still work with that a lot, being present. I have gained so many new tools, in to use in my daily life that it excites me. It excites me to have it. And I would say things like, oh, if only I knew then what I know now. I don't know what I would have done with it then. And I didn't know it because I dabbled in a few things here and there. I don't know if you remember, well, you probably weren't born then, maybe. A book, I'm Okay, You're Okay. This was like, I know it was in the 60s, in 1968.
That's a little before my time. School. Just a little.
I know. But I can remember, and it was about communication, basically. But I can remember, oh, everybody's okay. I'm okay. Everybody's okay, kind of thing. But the things that I've learned in mind change, when I think about the I'm okay, you're okay movement, because it was a big deal back in those days. When I think about it, I wasn't even ready for that yet, but I can see how things like that were stepping stones to me being able to incorporate, the whole mind change idea. And it was exciting. The Secret, I don't know, you've heard of The Secret, right? Yeah. That too. And it was like, I can remember going through that whole thing without changing anything at all. And yet, with mind change, I could see some of the principles from things like that, come into play. Yeah. So,
Oh, that's so great.
It's almost like that adage, when the student arrives, the teacher will appear. Yeah. And so that's kind of the way I feel about a lot of the mind change, things that I've learned.
Yeah, that's so great. I remember you mentioning that a big aha for you was this concept that we talk about in the book of like, I'm doing it to me. Now that can be, I have found for some people that can be sort of through a negative perception. It can be a little bit triggering for them. Yeah. But you had your own kind of relationship with that information. How did that make you feel?
Yeah. Well, it actually made me feel powerful. It made me feel like, oh, wow, me? I can, I am doing this to myself. It's kind of like when you talked about in the beginning of the book, when you talked about your own experience, that if you could manifest all these things in your body, then, why couldn't you undo it, basically. Right. And so that's pretty much the way I saw that. And I can remember doing that little thing, I can do all things, or I am doing these things to myself, and I can remember writing that out. And I have this habit of doing that with lots of little things, that I read it. I don't know when I do it. It just kind of triggers something, and it's, oh, I need to do this like this so I can answer all the questions that come up as you're changing all the words, And I remember thinking, okay, if I'm doing this to myself, okay, why am I doing this? What, all the questions come. And so you kind of sit in it, and you answer those questions. And it's like, okay, we can do this, or we can undo this.
Right. Yeah. It sort of takes some of the, oh my goodness, how did I get here? And
takes away the victim mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, I know it's been 5 years since you were, so that's a long time, but that's honestly one of the reasons I thought it would be so great to have you on is because you did a book club 5 years ago and I love you still talk positively about it and say that it's made changes. I remember originally when we talked, even just a few years ago, I think, you mentioned that it had, that some of the things that you had worked on was conflict with your husband and that you had really seen a big change in that. Do you remember back how that worked?
I try.
Yeah.
Because, it's been such a long, long time. But the biggest thing for me, we've never been the arguing type, but I found myself not even wanting to engage in little things that were no big deal. This is not a big deal to me, so why am I even bothering to have an answer for it or, keep it going? And so I think that mind change helped me with that, from the standpoint of there are enough conflicts, there are enough things in our daily lives, that can generate feelings of anger and everything else, and so it's like, it just felt so unnecessary. It just felt like, this is no big deal. Why even bother, Or I found myself listening more instead of having to have an answer for things, and just curiosity, wondering, things like, so how does this make you feel? These questions are constants, how does this make you feel? Because that's me. Everything is filtered through my feelings. My husband used to say, how did he say it? You have to stop wearing your feelings on your sleeve or something to that effect, because everything was, a feeling. But, it just really helped me not stop filtering things through my feelings, but asking myself things like, well, why do you feel that way before I get into the fray, instead of, it's just really, it helped me curtail my have to have an answer for everything, all those things. It just lended itself to questioning myself more about why I do the things I do.
Well, and that oftentimes the curiosity that we approach ourselves with, like if we've done it from a lot of times we're critical and we're negative and we have a lot of self-talk and chatter that happens in that way. And so of course we wouldn't want to engage with that. We kind of want to get away from that. But when you learn to start inquiring out of curiosity, out of fascination, out of power, it's a relatively small shift in perspective, but I feel like it changes everything.
It does change everything because there's less engagement that could become a negative. It's less of that and more of, again, it became, actually, I almost feel selfish. It became more about me, and wanting to be better, and there's something about growth, just a constant change in life. I don't think we're meant to stay the same always, because things are changing all around us, and other people are changing, so it's like we have to, at some point, make changes also. And so I just like the idea of growth because, I just don't want to be stagnant. I don't want to be same old. It's like, keep it moving,
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a refreshing thing. And to have a tool like Mind Change to kind of push that, put that into and have a little bit more of that kind of curiosity and exploration. Because I don't know about you when you were growing up, but I sort of saw people when they got older it's almost like they got more set in their ways. It's like they doubled down on things. And the way that I would view my grandparents, and even as I started to view my parents as I was getting older, I was like, they're never going to change. They're always going to be this way, and they want everyone else to be this way. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit of the narrative that as you get older, you get more and more kind of stuck. Mm-hmm. And so I love to see other people kind of bunking that, like, no, we're never done. The science says our brain keeps changing.
Yeah.
Which is so great, and new information for people. And so have you seen that yourself, and maybe in other people in your category of life, mm-hmm. that, like, how exciting that is that we can change and that you're learning new things and applying it in different ways?
Yeah, I do. I often suggest, like books to people when I'm talking to them, just because, you read something that means something, you want to share it. And I find that often people my age don't like reading anymore. Sometimes it could be because it's hard to see. I know it's getting that way with my eyesight and stuff, but they don't like reading anymore. And not that that's the only way you can learn, but for some reason, for me, a good book, is like, okay, so what I get to learn today, or a good sermon. I can hear a good sermon. I can hear, watch a good PBS show, and there's always something, to learn from it. So I think my thing is curiosity. I like being curious. I want to know, and so I'll go and read, whatever, and when I look at list of books, I've got a lot of books, given away a lot of books, and I keep saying I'm not going to buy another book. And I probably got about 4 or 5 books right now that I'm going to read at some point, but something new happens. And so I keep buying books. And I like that. I like the idea of a new perspective, so.
Why do you think that is, that it's a typical behavior for people as they age to maybe not want to expand and explore?
I'm not sure. I hadn't really given that much thought, but I think it's possibly things are changing so fast, and actually seem pretty complicated sometimes. It's like when I think of things like AI, for example, I almost want to run in the opposite direction. And part of that is because of misinformation, and so it's like, I like the idea of having a choice, being able to choose what I want to learn about and that kind of thing. And I don't know, when you're at home most of the time, which a lot of older people are, they stop moving as much and going places and doing fun things, just kind of like in this stuck place, of this is what old people do or don't do or whatever, So I don't really have an answer for that, but I think that curiosity is a good thing. And if you can, pick up something and learn something from it, do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an interesting thought when you look around and as fast as everything's going, that we kind of want to reinvest in what we do know, because we're like, well, at least I know this. But unfortunately, what a lot of people know is like the same patterns and the same thinking that's maybe been keeping them stuck for so long. And if there isn't anything that actually works to change, like if you've lived 70 some years of your life and you feel like, man, I've been trying to overcome this memory, this thought, this feeling, this pattern for 50 plus years, that is a long time to be doing something the same way and not getting any different results. So I would imagine that if they hadn't had the tools up to that point, then it would feel very daunting for them to try to think a different way. But like you said, they like to have the choice. And it's funny how power does give us choice and information does give us choice, and being able to realize maybe even after 50 plus years, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to think like that anymore. Or, that's why I thought like that or did that thing. And I don't have to do it anymore. Yeah. It's almost like there's more freedom, even if you've been doing something for 50 plus years, that there is there to offer. But then again, it makes sense because there has been very few tools that have really, really worked. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. So, I even think about, it seems like the world is geared towards the younger generation. Everything's changing and it's moving and it's coming, and it's like we're kind of on the way out. Crazy way to put it, but when you get used to something, that's what you're used to. Mm-hmm. And if you don't branch out, you'll stay in that same little rut. And so I have an amazing group of women that I love, and they love me back, and they're half my age, but they keep me feeling, like a younger woman, if you will. And it's not why I have those relationships, but they're great, and it's like I look at them and I see all of these qualities that I would love to have had as a woman their age, but I look at them and I think, oh my, what powerhouses they are, what information, they've got, that I didn't have. But also that the world itself is changing and evolving. It's like if you don't stay on top of what's going on, then you get left behind.
That's true.
So
when you were doing mind change and, working in the ways and actually getting into the method itself, were there people around you that were noticing anything, or were you getting any feedback from the people that maybe didn't know what you were doing?
Well, the mere mention of the word mind change, some people were curious. But again, it was during the first time we did it, everything was shut down. So it was hard. But I've continued to do it over the years. I've had people, when you say the word mind change, I think they think it's something weird. And I probably would have too, maybe, I can remember as the changes started to appear, as I started to change, I can remember especially my husband would say, okay, that's some of your mind change stuff, right? And I go, yeah, but he got really curious, because he actually saw changes. And so as a result of that, he became curious. And so I'd share different things with him, from the Mind Change book and stuff. And actually, he has a book of his own now, he does. Wow. It's taken quite a while, for it to happen that way. But I'm excited for him to learn whatever he learns from it, that'll suit him. Because I know, I can see the things that will help him, and I'm not saying, well, anyway, I just know that the things that are in mind change can help anybody and everybody. So it's just a matter of how much are you willing to invest, in doing this book or reading this book. And again, I don't know if I would have gotten as much out of it had I picked it up and read it on my own, all by myself. I think, although I'm sure it's possible, but I think for me, having the group setting and being able to share and listen to other people share and visibly see people change, see so many things be different. It was nothing short of amazing. I had my miracle moments too. So, it was exciting.
It is a really cool thing when it's one of the things I love about the Mind Change community is miracles are the norm. Like the stuff that we hear, I'm just like blown away by the miraculous things.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get a little spoiled because you hear good thing after good thing after good thing. And it's not that people don't hit challenges at times. I mean, sort of that's what we're doing, is working through the challenges. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they're not there. Mm-hmm. But to hear these things, and I get into sometimes other communities for various reasons, and it's so different out there. People are really stuck and they're really sad and scared and sick. And sometimes it's like, oh gosh, yeah, I forget that's the way it used to be. That's the norm for most people.
Yeah, it is.
So to watch other people have their miracles, and even if you're in a struggly part, someone right next to you is having this like monumental change and shift. Yeah. It's really cool.
Even to know it's possible, it's, I think sometimes we're afraid of change, or afraid of failure.
Yeah.
More than anything else, and so I think that can stop people. And again, people aren't used to miracles, this shouldn't have happened, or how is this possible, or why is this happening? But asking those questions to me is just such a great thing to do, just so that you can stretch yourself, so you can figure out things, I'm still learning, things all the time,
Yeah, thank goodness. It's so great.
Yeah.
For you, I know it's always hard to remember the problems that we used to have, because with mind change,
they change and then
they're so much.
Yeah. They're totally gone.
It's really hard for people to get that unless they've done this. But do you have any sort of reminders of your miracle moments, one or two, or even something you saw in someone else close to you that really helped you realize, like, wow, this is something different?
Yeah. My personal biggest memory moment, and you used the word memory, was actually about memory for me. And I didn't expect it to happen, and it wasn't something I was working on, but I noticed for many years that I had a hard time remembering my early childhood. Like I could remember from a certain point and beyond, but nothing before that. And it wasn't even like, I'm trying to think of what I was thinking at 3 years old or anything like that. But I mean, just memories of things that I did as a child, like school memories, what did I do in elementary school? What was going on during this time or that time? I couldn't remember those things. And I used to really sit and try to remember what it was like. And then I just kind of gave up. And it was like, oh, I guess this is normal. You forget some things and they're not important. So you just keep it moving. And I can remember during the exercise, it was an exercise that talked about rewriting your childhood.
Yeah.
And it was in the workbook. But anyway, I sat down to rewrite my childhood. And it was a funny thing. I didn't even realize it. I didn't know if I had a good or a bad childhood because I couldn't remember the childhood. But part of the reason why I couldn't remember the childhood was because of some traumatic things that happened. And so when I buried those things, I must have buried all the memories with it, because I don't know why it was painful or whatever happened. But I started to write my childhood, and I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm thinking, I didn't have a bad childhood, but I did remember that something bad happened to me during childhood. And I kept writing, and I finished my assignment, and it was fine. And I just remember thinking, boy, I didn't have a bad childhood at all. It's like, especially some of the things that I've heard about people's childhoods and stuff, and not comparing, but, mine just wasn't bad. I couldn't think of, and I can't tell you, it was probably a day or even two after. It was sudden that all of a sudden, and it was like, it was like these memories came flooding back. It was like, it wasn't just one. It was like, oh my goodness. So to me, it was like a miracle, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I can't believe it. It's like, There was no explanation for it except that assignment that I had just done,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for days, I cannot tell you, I must have gone through every memory I ever had. I remembered fun things. I remembered little things like stepping on birds, those little stickers, at the playground,
Mm-hmm.
you have to sit down and take them out of your foot. I remembered scenes, graphic, I can remember just so many memories. I remembered dogs. I remembered parks. I remembered things I did that weren't good. My mom probably would have strangled me if she'd known. But, back then we didn't have babysitters and all that stuff. It was like a community where everybody took care of everybody else. And, but it was like a miracle to me. And so I can remember just sharing that with everybody that would listen, and still I marvel at it because, and still, every once in a while a new one will peek through, and it's like, and I always take it back, to the fact that mind change help unlock that hidden, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that excites me. I love sharing that story because and encouraging other people too, that when you're struggling with something, journal it, even how you'd like for it to have been or what's different about it. I use that a lot because I think it's very effective with helping people to release, to just let go.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That was my experience too, having perceived my childhood in one way as very negative and very traumatic, realizing only through starting to do this work that was based on maybe 10 memories. And that's all I had of my childhood. And the rest wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like you said, so a thing happened, a bad thing happened, and maybe a few bad things happen. But that's what our mind does, is it just compartmentalizes. And in an effort to, if you don't have the tools and the resources at the time or the support to actually thoroughly, process that information out of your mind and body, it just blocks it away. But along with every other good thing too. Yeah. So there's so many people out there who really believe they don't have childhood memories. And they have them, they just don't have access to them. And when you start doing the work and making peace with your subconscious mind in a responsible way, in an empowered way, then the brain goes, oh, you can handle this. Oh, we're working with it now.
Yeah.
Great, let's do that. And here's all the rest too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had someone say to me once that probably you're not able to handle those memories, and it's your body's way of protecting you, until you're ready to be able to do that. And I thought, wow, well, I sure am glad I finally got ready, to hear that. But sometimes we need a little nudge, we need that somebody to, say, hey, write this out, think about it, look at it. I'm not fearful of hard things or bad things, I want to know. I want to see it all. I don't care what it looks like. Let's just bring it on, let's show it. And I don't think I had that attitude even before mind change. Mind change, I think it gave me courage. It was like, you don't have to be afraid of this. It's not going to kill you. It's like, so let's just walk in here and see what's in there and see what needs to come out, And so, it just gives you courage to face hard things. That's the simplest answer for me.
And often people think if there's one negative thing in there, then there might be like a cascade. Yeah. I really think that's what scares most people about getting in at all. And because they didn't have the tools before when it happened and their body safely put it away. So many people still, even if we're adults and we're, have had children or even grandchildren, we might still not have the tools.
Yeah.
And so when you walk through mind change and it gives you the power, then it takes away some of the.
Oh, for sure. I remember thinking once, we were introduced to the book initially, and I thought to myself, and this with dread, I thought, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to me? That was probably what was going to come up and come out, and I thought, that's like a Pandora's box, it's like, oh, I don't want to, and yet it just seemed to have melted away. It didn't seem like this big, bad, horrible thing, that I was going to go through, it became, oh, okay, we get to look at this, let me really look at it, and it takes away the fear, it takes away, well, for me anyway, it was like, okay, I tell you what, I don't know what it would have been like had I known all this information so long ago. It was like, look out, world, here she comes.
Right.
But
I already feel that way about you. You're a little like, look out, world. I love that.
Let me tell you, life is meant to be powerful and fun and, all kinds of things, but not, boring and stuck and, those kinds of things. So I'm so glad that you guys came along. Mind change.
Well, it only works if people will work it. So it's great.
Yeah.
I love that. That's such a great story.
But we all need encouragement sometimes, just to, and when you see it done, it makes you feel like you can do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's the whole thing, is that we approach it with science and we say, it's not that you're not broken. Even if you're doing this thing or have this thing or have had this thing happen, there's good reason for it.
Yeah.
And that almost cracks open that door a little bit so that we can bring the really big and scary things out that maybe no one else can deal with, because we are seeing it through a different set of eyes. We're not going to judge it, criticize it, beat it down, judge it like in such a negative way like we've done ourselves. We're curious and we're like, you must have a good reason for being here. So even the worst possible things, if we can look at it through curiosity, it almost like settles down all that fear.
Yeah.
And then we can actually deal with it.
And not only that, I think I like to think of it as the psychology was taken out of it, and your brain, your body, and how we actually do work, was introduced. And that makes everything better, along with, like the non-judgment and being able to be kind to yourself. Who goes around telling people to be kind to themselves? I mean, we do it a lot more now,
right?
But that wasn't a thing, And so it's like, I have to remind myself, and I love it when I'm able to encourage somebody else too, to be kind to yourself. It's not all that. I mean, we've got enough stuff, pressing and pushing us down that we...
Well, it's a lot easier to be kind to ourselves when we can look back and say, maybe I actually did have people did love me and I was doing my best. And it's a lot easier to be kind when we've done the work to see we were doing the best we could at the time. And there was love and there was support, maybe where we didn't feel it before.
Yeah.
And maybe if it wasn't there, we're going back and giving it the attention now. So now it is there. So it's a lot easier to be kind when that's the perspective.
Yeah. Another kind of a revelation, if you will. I can remember, and I didn't remember this before, but I was actually a teenager, but my mom, when she'd be really depressed, or down, she'd talk to me. I can remember sitting at the foot of her bed or down beside the bed. She'd be in bed and she'd be talking to me. And at the time, of course, I didn't have any advice to give, but, it was like, I just listened. So I was her sounding board. But then I got to thinking, what is wrong with this picture? I didn't think that then.
Of course.
But going through mind change, it really clarified, some things for me. And so it's like moments like that, things like that, it's like, wow. And, you mentioned she did the best she could with what she had. I have so much more empathy for adults, period, just parents, grandparents, everybody, because they do the best, with what they have. But not knowing that, I think it keeps us from being a lot more compassionate, with each other, especially parents. And, man, oh man. And I'm thinking, man, I sure hope that I'm teaching my children now to have compassion. I want them to show me, because I can see a lot of things that I didn't do well.
Right.
At this point in the game. But back then I certainly didn't. And of course we never want to hurt our children, but things happen, know. And so, well, now I get to let them know that now that they're adults, they can do stuff, they can do something about what's going on with them.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's like one of the tenets of the book is we can only give what we have.
Mm-hmm.
When you're able to travel back and look at that memory and say, okay, Mom doing the best she could, reframe that, but not the approach of, oh, so sorry, little Brenda, your mom was doing the best she could, but, you just are going to have to sit there and suffer as the sounding board. You're able to go with Mind Change, you're able to go back and consider Mom and Brenda and say she was doing the best she could with what she had, but Brenda needed more.
Yeah.
So let's give more to Brenda. And as you do that, I really feel like we give our kids something better to say, hey, like if my parents are doing the best they could and I needed more, we can hold that space for our kids saying, hey, I did the best that I could, but if you've got more that you need from me, bring it on. Let's do this, because I was able to do that for my parents, even if it was just through the mind, that's where our reality is held. So yeah, I think it changes generationally when we change ourselves.
Yes.
So it's so great to be doing that work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So is there anything...
So when are you going national?
I know. We're growing as fast as we can with and still to be able to keep our arms around everybody. There's a lot of stuff out there. But is there anything else you feel like from your unique perspective, stage of life, experience with Mind Change that you feel like someone out there might be listening and that you feel like you could speak to them specifically? Anything else we didn't cover?
Don't let the name throw you off. It's good, because it definitely is a mind change, but it's learning, it's learning how we work, how our bodies work, how our minds, how the brain works. And you mentioned it works if you work it. Work it. If I could, if I had known the outcome of what I have experienced through doing Mind Change, and I've done it a couple of times. I've done it with some other people also. But if I could tell myself one thing, it would be to throw caution to the wind, to not hold back anything. I mean, anything. It's almost like this is your one chance. It's like, do it. Do it. I was like, I'd be the biggest cheerleader. And I constantly tell people, when I know of a mind change group starting or something, to do it, and lots of people have, so yeah.
You've influenced a lot of people.
Well, I've been influenced a lot it's the greatest thing, that's happened outside of, the Bible and that kind of thing. It's been the greatest thing that's ever happened change, as far as change goes. When you can see it, it makes a difference to be able to know that you're not the same way that you were. So anyway, and constantly growing. I'll tell this little story. But I remember being in a workshop, and during the breakout groups, we could ask questions and stuff. And get answers, from people. And I remember saying, I remember wondering why I seem to attract certain kinds of people. I mean, it was like, what is wrong with me? Not really wrong, but what's wrong with me? Why do I tend to attract certain kinds of people? And they always seem to, for lack of a better phrase, super needy, or, just constantly needing something. And I won't tell you who told me this, but I said, oh, so why do you think this happens? And at one point he said, so think fast. Don't stop to think about it. Just answer really fast. He says, what would you be doing if you weren't doing that? If you weren't, and I thought, oh, I wouldn't have anything to do. It almost seemed like that was my life. It was like, oh my goodness. But I mean, it's like moments like that, things like that, they send me inward, and I want to answer all these questions. And for some reason, questions beget other questions, and you just kind of keep going down all these questions. But that to me is when change takes place, when you're having to stop and think about what it is that's bothering you, or what it is that you don't like about what's happening within you or what you're doing. And so, that's what I would say, just explore, go down that rabbit hole, and see what's down there.
Yeah. You won't get lost in it. If you take the mind change route, we land someplace, and then you've got the tools to change. Mm-hmm. So it's actually okay to follow it now. Because then, I don't know about you, when I followed some of those things before I had the tools, it would just spin me out worse. And then I would be doing one of my diseases or one of my illnesses or something even better, because I would just spin out. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like with mind change, it gives us very direct tools and directions into, and then what to do when you get there, and how not to let it get too big, whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah. So
it takes the fear out of it. It takes the fear out of change. Mm-hmm. It takes the fear out of being the best you can be.
Yeah. I love that. Mm-hmm. Brenda, it's always such a pleasure. You are just such a great example of just how to keep humaning in a great growing way.
I like that. I'm a praise person.
Yeah.
Humaning.
You are humaning still in an excellent way. And I feel very honored to know you and to watch your progress and to listen to the way you talk about mind change and just life in general. It gives me a lot of hope.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me and for helping me so much through mind change.
Yeah, well, that's all you. All right. Well, thank you. And thank all of you for joining us once again on the Mind Change Podcast, where we are changing the world one mind at a time.